got opium. All these things you could put your name to, they were yours. A lot of them were quack remedies actually, didn't have any useful activity at all. There's one, my favourite one in there. It's a bottle, and on it is written Spirit of Hartshorn. Wow, what on earth is this? It's like something out of Harry Potter. Just imagine, Spirit of Hartshorn. Well, reality is disappointing, I'm afraid. It's smelling salts, ammonia. Back then, they made it with boiled up animal bones, so that's where it gets its Spirit of Hartshorn. Now, I didn't think smelling salts existed anymore, so I gave this talk, and a little old lady in the audience rummaged in her bag and produced this little blue bottle. It's my smelling salts. God, what do you use that for? I asked her. She said, well, if I feel a bit faint or out of sorts, I'll just take a, and it brings me around, it perks me up, gets me going. And that's exactly what the Victorian ladies did. If they were feeling faint, had the vapours, Spirit of Hartshorn, smelling salts. So the drugs had odd names back then, so did the diseases. If you want to know the sorts of diseases that we had, well, they were called things like dropsy, scrofula, gleet. Scrofula is TB. That's quite rare now. Dropsy, that's heart failure. Gleet is just catarrh, any sort of effusion. So they had odd names for these. Now, that really brings me to the point of what the doctor's main job was on the ship. It was to keep it free of disease. A ship is the worst possible place for things that are contagious. In fact, typhoid was also called ship's fever, sometimes prison fever, because people in a confined space are at risk. Now this ship is sailing non-stop to Australia. So if you make sure everybody's healthy when you start, they should be healthy when you get there. Well, one of the risks of sailing to Australia rather than steaming and sailing on this ship was you had to keep stopping to pick up water. And it was in dodgy places. And they hadn't realised that the contamination from water that gave you cholera, typhoid, things like that. But the worst disease back then was this one, smallpox. Very nasty. That's what you look like if you've got smallpox. It's a most unpleasant disease. And the lethality rate was about 50%. So, you took a chance with it. Fortunately, there was a doctor near Bristol, Dr. Jenner, who discovered that you could protect people from smallpox by vaccinating them. It was an accidental discovery, and it was the fact that milkmaids who had cowpox, which is mild, never got smallpox. And if they did, it was mild. So he introduced vaccination. This is what you had to have to come on board the ship as a passenger. It's a vaccination certificate. Today you've got to have your COVID passport ready. Proof of vaccination. Here we go. This is a Victorian equivalent. And on the back it's signed up where, when it was delivered, and all the business. If you didn't vaccinate your children, there was a penalty, a fine, 25 shillings. It was compulsory, in fact. Well, it managed to wipe out smallpox. Up until a couple of years ago, if you went on a cruise ship, they were very worried about novavirus. You don't hear much about that now. Who cares about a bit of vomiting and diarrhea, winter vomiting, when you've got something like COVID to worry about? So some things don't change. Go on a ship today, it's COVID. Go on a ship back when this was sailing, it was smallpox. Right, well, I've talked about diseases, I've talked about the drugs. The one thing I haven't mentioned, which is probably going to interest you, what do doctors earn? How much money did he get? Well, we know he got £20 a month, thereabouts, for looking after the crew. In addition, because there was no NHS, it was all private medicine, the poor people, the emigrants, couldn't afford it. So the government paid for that. The doctor got 5 shillings, 25 pence for every emigrant who arrived alive. That's the incentive. So you've got to make sure they arrive alive. No good having dead ones, they don't count. So on this ship, there'll be perhaps 500 emigrants. Multiply that by 5 shillings, 25 pence, that's £125 a surgeon on top of his salary. In addition to that, our dear doctor gets money from the first class passengers. They have to pay for all their medicines. Admittedly, the doctor has to make them, but they have to pay for them. So he got that money as well. We know that one of the doctors was given 50 gold guineas by a grateful patient on one voyage. Gold guineas are worth a lot more now than they were then, but you can imagine that's good money. So there we are. It was quite a nice job. It must be hard work because you're on duty full time. The ship's crew, obviously, were working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Or most of them were. And so basically, you could have a lot of work on. They were always grateful if one of the passengers was a medic, because some of our passengers were medics, so they would help out as well. So, there you go, that's our ship surgeon, and I've even got a picture here of Mr. Samuel Archer in later life. Here he is, he's in an army uniform. He's in an army uniform. He joined the British Army in India. So he did a couple of voyages on this ship. He joined the army, he got promoted, and he ended up as a Surgeon General. That's where we get the term. In America it's important because the person who signs every bottle of booze and every packet of cigarettes and says how dangerous they are. Here it's the Chief Medical Officer, that's Mr. Whitty. But also Sir. Most important people. So it was a good introduction to making a career. Andrew Alexander stayed on the ship for about 5 years. He was one of the longest serving surgeons. Some of the others were on their way out to Australia to emigrate and start to practice in Australia. So they would go on the ship, earn the money, collect it from the government house in Australia and set up. Very nice. So there you are. I hope I've given you a few insights into what it was like on board the ship and what the surgeons had to do. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening. I hope you did enjoy it.